The garage door gap let in a single strip of gray Kentucky frost. Inside, the concrete smelled like motor oil, rust, and freezing dust. Nora Morgan stood frozen, her chest seized. On the oil-stained floor beneath Chris's workbench, a small figure lay curled beneath a stained blanket. It was Chloe. Her 6-year-old daughter was wearing pink star pajamas. One foot was bare. Her cheek rested on a folded sweatshirt. Finger-shaped bruises darkened both tiny arms. "Chloe," Nora whispered. The girl's eyes snapped open in fear. She scrambled back, hitting the metal workbench legs with a sharp clang before recognizing her mother. "Mommy!" Chloe lunged forward, wrapping her arms around Nora's waist. Nora dropped her leather laptop bag and collapsed to her knees. She pulled Chloe close. The child was cold to the bone. Her sweater felt like ice. Her hair smelled like engine grease. "What happened, baby?" Chloe buried her face in Nora's coat and shivered silently against her chest. Nora checked her phone. 4:45 p.m., Tuesday. She was not supposed to be home yet. But to understand how a 6-year-old child ended up freezing on a concrete floor while her family drove toward Colorado, you have to turn the clock back 48 hours to the moment Nora stepped off the highway into a quiet, dying house. 2 days before Thanksgiving, slate-gray clouds hung low over the small town outside Fort Campbell. Nora drove her silver sedan down the gravel driveway, tires crunching over frozen mud. As a junior data and bookkeeping specialist at Community Bank, her daily life revolved around spreadsheets, transaction logs, and ledger entries, quiet work that demanded absolute precision. Finishing her branch audit in Clarksville a day early, Nora cleared Wednesday off. She stopped at the grocery store for a fresh pumpkin pie and a bag of cinnamon pecans, Chloe's favorite treat. Driving home, she pictured Chris's black Ram truck near the porch, his mother Victoria fussing over a fresh tablecloth, and Chloe running across the yard with open arms. Instead, the driveway was empty. The house stood dark against the tree-line. The porch light was dead. Wind rattled the bare oak branches, scraping dry leaves across the roof. Nora parked and stepped out into the biting air. The front door was locked, but the side mudroom door swung open an inch. Hinges creaked as she pushed it. "Chris," she called into the dark. "Victoria." Only silence answered. She stepped inside and set the grocery bags on the kitchen island. The house smelled faintly of stale coffee and floor cleaner. It was eerily tidy, no dishes in the sink, no toys on the rug, no boots by the door. It looked like a staged model home, hollow and cold. Beside a half-empty mug of cold coffee lay a yellow legal pad. Written across the top page in Chris's large, careless handwriting were 4 lines. "We took everyone to Aspen. She was never a real family, anyway. Teach her a lesson. Deal with her." Nora read the words once, then twice. A soft rustle sounded from the hallway behind her. Nora turned instantly. Chloe stood in the garage doorway, holding the edges of an old moving blanket wrapped around her small shoulders. Her pink pajamas were covered in gray dust. "Mommy," Chloe whispered, her voice hollow and flat. "Grandma said I couldn't go to Aspen because I spilled the juice. She said I wasn't a real family member." Nora felt the air leave her lungs. She dropped to her knees, reaching out. Chloe stepped forward slowly, dragging the heavy blanket. Nora pulled back her sleeves to check her skin. Fresh, dark purple handprints covered Chloe's forearms, the clear marks of a tight, forceful grip. "Who did this, Chloe?" Nora asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Daddy got mad," Chloe whispered, staring at her bare foot. "When I spilled the orange juice on Grandma's white rug. He grabbed my arms and pulled me out here. Grandma said I needed to learn." Nora's hands trembled, but her mind went icy sharp. Years of analyzing ledger discrepancies had trained her to stop, look, and document before reacting. Panic made people careless. Anger made people blind. She pulled out her smartphone. Holding Chloe's small arms up to the kitchen light, she photographed the purple marks, capturing the date and timestamp clearly on screen. Click, click, click. She carried Chloe inside, deadbolt every door, and set the thermostat to 72 degrees. She checked the refrigerator. It held expired milk, ketchup, and a single frozen pizza. Chris knew Nora was not scheduled to return until Wednesday night. They had deliberately left a 6-year-old child in an unheated garage with no food for nearly 24 hours. Nora warmed a slice of pizza and sat Chloe at the kitchen island. Chloe ate 2 small bites before pushing the plate away, eyes darting nervously toward the window. "You're safe now," Nora murmured, placing her hand over Chloe's cold fingers. "Nobody is coming back through that door tonight." After Chloe fell asleep on the sofa, wrapped in clean quilts, Nora walked back to the kitchen. Beneath the coffee mug, her fingers brushed against a crumpled manila envelope Chloe had carried inside under her blanket. Nora opened it, expecting travel itineraries. Instead, she pulled out legal paper titled in bold black ink, "Mortgage Refinance Application." At the bottom of the page, on the line marked co-borrower, was her printed name, Nora Morgan. Below it sat a signature, a stiff, practiced forgery of her handwriting. She flipped the page. Another document, another forgery. Taped to the corner was a yellow sticky note in Victoria's slanted script. "Destroy after Thanksgiving." Nora stood alone in her dark kitchen. Wind rattled the window panes, but the noise in her head died down to absolute zero. She looked at the forged signature, then at her sleeping daughter on the sofa. No tears came. Only a cold, steady clarity settled over her heart. Chris and Victoria Sterling thought she was an invisible clerk who only shuffled papers and kept her head down. They thought she would never notice. They were wrong. Nora folded the forged document into her briefcase, walked to the window, and watched the dark Kentucky sky wait for dawn. By 6 a.m., thick yellow light filtered through the blinds. The house remained cold and dead. Nora sat at the kitchen island, her hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee. Across from her, Chloe sat wrapped in a wool blanket, sipping warm milk. Her small face looked pale, but the panic in her eyes had softened into exhaustion. Chloe reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small stuffed rabbit with one floppy ear. With her tiny, bruised fingers, she worked at a loose seam along the rabbit's belly. She pulled out a small black USB flash drive and set it on the wooden counter. "Grandma hid this inside Barnaby," Chloe whispered, her voice barely audible. "I saw her do it when they were packing. She said if I told you, she would leave me behind." Nora stared at the drive. Her skin prickled. "She hid it in your toy." Chloe nodded slowly. "Grandma said it was her secret, but she dropped the big envelope on the floor, and I picked it up too." Nora picked up the drive. The plastic was cool and light. She carried her laptop to the kitchen table, opened the screen, and plugged the drive into the USB port. The drive clicked as it seated into the port. A folder opened automatically. It contained 3 subfolders named with dates spanning the last 6 months. Nora clicked the most recent folder. Inside were dozens of video files, saved directly from the home security system Chris had installed 2 years ago. Nora clicked the first file. The video is loaded in crisp, high definition. The recording showed the very kitchen where Nora was sitting. The timestamp read 3 weeks prior, at 2:15 p.m. on a Thursday, a time when Nora was at work at Community Bank. On the screen, Chris sat at the dining table, wearing his flannel work shirt. Victoria stood beside him, holding a thick stack of papers and a black gel pen. "She's too meticulous, Mom," Chris said on the recording, his voice clear through the laptop speakers. If she sees a new mortgage application, she'll check the loan-to-value ratio in 5 minutes. She does ledger audits for a living. Victoria scoffed, adjusting her gold necklace. Nora is a clerk, Chris. She stares at numbers all day because she lacks imagination. She trusts you. More importantly, she's never home on Thursdays. Hand me the pen. Nora watched, her breath catching in her throat, as Victoria leaned over the table. The camera captured Victoria's hand moving across the paper. She was practicing Nora's signature. She signed once. Chris shook his head. Too sharp. Nora loops her M at the bottom. Victoria signed a second time, then a third. She repeated the motion on a blank pad of paper, over and over, until the strokes matched the signature on Nora's state driver's license, which lay open on the table beside them. There, Victoria said on the video, tapping the page with her manicured fingernail. It's clean. The loan officer at First National is a friend of your uncle. He'll clear the digital submission without calling her. Chris smiled. If this refinance goes through, we clear $200,000 in equity before the end of the month. And once the money transfers to the new account, Victoria added, her voice cold, and even, we file the property transfer after Thanksgiving. By the time she realizes her name is off the deed, the funds will already be in the Aspen LLC. Nora sat frozen in her chair. The room seemed to shrink around her. The hum of the refrigerator sounded deafening. Her heart pounded against her ribs, but her mind did not race. It locked into place. For 3 years, Chris had treated her like an invisible shadow in her own home. He had dismissed her job at the bank as a low-wage distraction. He had let his mother manage their holiday plans, their household rules, and their social standing. Nora had stayed quiet, enduring the cold looks and the subtle jabs, telling herself that compromise was the price of a stable home for Chloe. Now, looking at the screen, the truth lay naked before her. They had not just marginalized her. They had planned a systematic financial execution. Nora paused the video. She took a slow, deep breath, letting the icy air fill her lungs. Her fingers ceased trembling. In her line of work at Community Bank, Nora reviewed transaction anomalies every day. She knew how fraud worked. Fraud relied on speed, deception, and the victim's emotional paralysis. Once a victim panicked, they made mistakes. They confronted the fraudster too early, destroying the chain of evidence. Nora was not going to panic. She opened a blank document on her laptop. She titled it, Evidence_log_Sterling. Methodically, she began cataloging every file on the drive. She noted the file names, the exact timestamps, the visual contents, and the corresponding paper documents sitting inside the manila envelope beside her keyboard. She created 3 separate backups of the USB drive, one on an encrypted external hard drive, one on a secure cloud server, and one on a physical flash drive she locked inside her personal bank box keyring. She looked over at Chloe, who was quietly drawing with a blue crayon on a paper napkin. Nora closed her laptop with a soft snap. She felt no anger now. The hurt had burned away, leaving behind a hard, sharp edge of pure resolve. They thought she was just a quiet clerk who shuffled papers. They thought her precision was a weakness. She stood up, walked to the counter, and poured the cold coffee into the sink. She would use the exact skills they had mocked to tear their plan apart, piece by piece, number by number. At 7:30 a.m., the bright, fluorescent lights of the urgent care clinic buzzed overhead. The lobby smelled sharply of rubbing alcohol and industrial cleaner. Paper turkeys hung from the ceiling. Soft carols echoed from a small ceiling speaker. Nora sat on a hard vinyl chair. Chloe sat beside her, clutching Barnaby the rabbit with both hands. A nurse in scrubs called out, "Chloe Sterling." In exam room 2, Dr. Melissa Carter stepped in. She was a pediatrician with silver hair and a quiet, steady demeanor. She gently lifted the sleeves of Chloe's pajama top. Dr. Carter's smile vanished. Her eyes hardened. She reached for a small plastic ruler on the tray. Carefully, she measured the purple marks on Chloe's forearms. Click, click. She snapped 4 photos with a medical tablet. Nora, Dr. Carter said quietly, these marks match a high-force, crushing grip. Tell me what happened. I found her in our unheated garage, Nora said, her voice flat. Her father and grandmother left her there before driving to Colorado. The exam room went completely silent. Dr. Carter pulled her stool closer to Nora. Under Kentucky law, I am a mandatory reporter. I must file a report with Child Protective Services immediately. This creates a legal shield for Chloe. Please file it, Nora said, nodding once. An hour later, Nora pulled her silver sedan into her neighborhood driveway. She spotted Mrs. Evelyn Jenkins standing by the mailbox. Evelyn was 71, a retired school librarian who lived across the street. Her hands trembled as she hurried over. Nora, Evelyn gasped, her breath forming white clouds in the freezing morning air. Thank God you're home. Nora stepped out, shielding Chloe inside the car. Evelyn, what's wrong? Last Friday night, Evelyn whispered, looking toward the empty Sterling house. It was below 40 degrees. I saw Chloe sitting on your garage steps after dark. Nora felt a cold knife turn in her chest. You saw her. I brought over soup, Evelyn said, her eyes filling with tears. Victoria answered the door. She wouldn't let me in. She said the child needed to learn. She said, that little girl isn't really ours anyway. I took pictures from my porch. Nora took Evelyn's phone. On screen was a photo time-stamped November 20th, 7:48 p.m. Chloe sat on cold concrete steps in a dirty blanket. In a second photo, Chris stood in the lit doorway, watching her without moving. Evelyn then handed Nora a folded slip of paper. I found this blowing across your driveway Saturday morning. It was a fuel receipt from Aspen Picken County Airport with a printed reservation for a luxury cabin matching the property documents. Thank you, Evelyn, Nora said, holding the paper tight. Inside the house, Nora dialed her laptop. Within 10 minutes, she was on an encrypted video call with Audrey Reed, a senior compliance specialist at First National Bank and Nora's college friend. Nora laid everything out on the kitchen table. The medical report, Evelyn's photos, the airport receipt, the forged refinance application, and the USB logs. Audrey stared at the screen, her jaw set tight. They didn't just forge your signature, Nora. Chris attempted a digital submission through a flagged internal portal at First National yesterday afternoon. My system caught the IP address. From Colorado? Nora asked. Directly from a resort Wi-Fi in Aspen, Audrey confirmed. He tried to execute the final wire transfer request electronically. Because you haven't canceled the application on your end, the system didn't block it outright. It flagged it for suspicious activity. The fraud division is watching the account right now. If I report the forgery and cancel the portal now, he gets a slap on the wrist for a failed attempt, Nora noted. Exactly, Audrey said, a sharp smile touching her lips. But if we leave the portal open with an internal compliance flag, every click he makes from Aspen is recorded as an active federal financial crime. He is digging his own grave. Leave it open, Nora said without hesitation. Let him finish digging. That evening, Nora's phone chimed on the counter. The caller ID displayed Chris's name. Nora set her laptop to record the audio before tapping the speaker button. Nora, Chris's voice boomed through the speaker, loud and relaxed. Background music and laughter echoed behind him. Are you done throwing your little tantrum yet? Nora kept her voice flat and neutral. You left our 6-year-old daughter in a frozen garage, Chris. Chris scoffed. Oh, don't start with the drama. It wasn't a garage. She had a blanket. Mom thought she needed to learn responsibility. You baby her too much. Where are you? Nora asked quietly. We're having drinks at the lodge, Chris replied, carelessly. If you spent less time obsessing over your stupid bank spreadsheets and more time supporting my business, none of this would happen. You chose your little job over this family. Nora looked at the recording bar pulsing on her screen. Why wasn't Chloe invited to Aspen, Chris? There was a pause. Then Chris chuckled dryly. My mother was right. Chloe would have just slowed everyone down. We'll be home Saturday. Have the house clean. The line went dead. Nora stopped the recording and saved the audio file. She walked into the bathroom and locked the door. She turned on the faucet, letting hot water fill the basin. Stepping up to the mirror, she looked at her reflection. The tired, timid woman who had let her mother-in-law run her life for 6 years was gone. Nora picked up hair shears from the drawer. With quick, deliberate cuts, she trimmed her long, frayed hair into a sharp, shoulder-length bob. She washed her face, wiped away the shadows beneath her eyes, and applied a light coat of lip balm. She stared into the mirror. Her jaw was set. Her eyes were bright and clear. She was no longer a victim waiting for help. She was the storm coming for them. Saturday morning arrived crisp and bright. Sunlight reflected off the frosted glass windows of the Wilma Rudolph Event Center. Inside the grand ballroom, autumn wreaths and small American flags adorned every round dining table. The room hummed with soft orchestral music, clinking crystal, and the rich scent of roasted turkey, pine, and expensive perfume. Over 200 local figures, military leaders, and journalists filled the seats for the annual Community Service Awards luncheon. At the front of the ballroom stood a raised stage backed by a massive velvet banner reading, "Honoring those who strengthen our families." Behind the podium stood Victoria Sterling. She wore a tailored burgundy velvet dress, a heavy gold necklace, and a radiant smile. She gestured warmly toward the crowd as cameras flashed. Family is the bedrock of everything we do, Victoria's voice echoed smoothly through the sound system. When our loved ones serve, we must protect the home front with unwavering integrity, kindness, and devotion. Near the stage, Chris stood in the VIP row. He wore a crisp suit jacket over his turtleneck, his dark hair neatly slicked back. He smiled broadly, holding a glass of sparkling cider, soaking in the admiration directed at his mother. The event coordinator stepped toward the podium, holding a heavy mahogany plaque engraved with gold letters. And now, for her exemplary dedication to local military families, we present the Community Leader Award to Mrs. Victoria Sterling. Applause erupted across the ballroom. Photographers stepped forward, lenses raised. The heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open with a muffled thud. The room's temperature seemed to drop instantly. Head after head turned toward the main entrance. Nora Morgan stepped into the hall. She wore a sharp navy pantsuit, a crisp white blouse, and black leather pumps. Her new shoulder-length bob framed a face that was calm and entirely devoid of fear. Beside her walked Audrey Reed, holding a slim leather folder, and Detective Mark Martinez, dressed in a dark suit with his police badge clipped to his belt loop. Behind them stood 2 uniformed officers and 2 federal bank fraud investigators carrying sealed cardboard evidence boxes. Nora walked down the center aisle. Her heel clicks rang out against the hardwood floor like steady metronome beats. Click, click, click. Chris's smile froze. His glass trembled, cider sloshing over his knuckles. Victoria's hands remained frozen midair, inches from the mahogany award. Her manicured smile faltered, her painted lips twitching slightly. "Can we help you?" the event coordinator asked, stepping toward Detective Martinez. "Yes," Detective Martinez said, his voice deep and carrying across the silent hall. "We are looking for Victoria Sterling and Chris Sterling." Victoria recovered instantly, letting out a light, musical laugh into the microphone. "Mark, is this some sort of surprise honor? We can certainly speak after the presentation." "It is not about a donation, Mrs. Sterling," Detective Martinez replied, stopping at the base of the stage. "We are executing an active investigation regarding federal mortgage fraud, identity theft, and felony child endangerment." Gasps echoed through the audience. Whispers rippled across the tables like wind through dry leaves. Victoria's face flushed red. She pointed a trembling finger directly at Nora. "This is her doing. My daughter-in-law is emotionally unstable. She has been making wild accusations." "Mrs. Sterling," Audrey Reed interrupted calmly, stepping forward and opening her leather folder. "As a senior compliance officer at First National Bank, I am handing you this formal document." Audrey stepped up the stage stairs and handed a thick folder straight into Victoria's hands. Victoria stared down at the bold red stamp across the cover, Federal Asset Freeze and Subpoena Dutses Tecum. "Your digital refinance application submitted from Aspen, Colorado on Thanksgiving Eve was flagged for active forgery," Audrey stated, her voice echoing clearly into the live microphones on the podium. "All associated bank accounts, property deeds, and credit lines linked to you and Chris Sterling have been frozen by federal order as of 8 o'clock this morning." Chris bolted toward the stage. "This is insane. You can't do this here. This is a private family matter." "It ceased being a private matter when you forged my signature on a federal mortgage document, Chris," Nora said. Her voice cut through the room with absolute, razor-sharp clarity. "Nora, shut up," Chris shouted, his face twisting in panic. "We did what we had to do. You were never here. You were always obsessed with your stupid bank job. And you left our 6-year-old daughter locked in a freezing garage without food," Nora replied, meeting his eyes without flinching. "She had a blanket." Victoria shrieked into the live microphone, her composure shattering completely. Her voice boomed through the speakers, harsh and shrill. "The child needed to learn discipline. She spilled juice on my rug. She isn't even in the real family. I knew I should have burned that envelope the second I dropped it." The entire ballroom went dead silent. The silence hung heavy, suffocating, and absolute. Victoria clamped her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with sudden, sickening realization. The microphone picked up her ragged intake of breath. Detective Martinez slowly pulled steel handcuffs from his coat pocket. "Thank you for the recorded confession, Mrs. Sterling." "Wait," Chris yelled, backing away toward the exit. "I didn't lock her out. It was my mother's idea. I was just—" Detective Martinez signaled the two uniformed officers. They stepped forward, grabbing Chris by both arms and sweeping his hands behind his back. The sharp clack-clack of steel cuffs, locking shut, sounded clearly across the quiet room. Two federal agents stepped up the stage stairs, taking Victoria firmly by her velvet sleeves and guiding her down toward the side exit. Cameras flashed frantically as news reporters scrambled toward the stage, microphones outstretched. Chris stared at Nora as he was led away in restraints. His face was pale, his eyes hollow with disbelief. "Nora, please, talk to them. We can fix this." Nora stood tall in the center aisle. She did not yell. She did not mock him. She simply looked at him with cool, quiet detachment, as if looking at a stranger she had never met. "It's already fixed, Chris," Nora said softly. She turned on her heel and walked out of the ballroom into the bright afternoon sun, leaving the shattered pieces of their lies behind her forever. 3 months later, late February air brought the crisp scent of damp earth and blooming dogwood buds to Clarksville. Inside the Montgomery County Courthouse, white fluorescent tubes hummed softly against wood-paneled walls. The room smelled of old paper, floor wax, and fresh coffee. Nora sat at the defense table beside Audrey Reed. She wore a simple charcoal blazer and a white button-down shirt. Her shoulder-length hair was neat, framing a calm, steady gaze. Across the aisle, Chris and Victoria sat with their defense attorneys. Chris's shoulders slouched inside an oversized gray suit. The arrogance that had once defined his posture was gone, replaced by a hollow, sullen stare at the polished mahogany table. Victoria sat stiffly beside him, her head bowed, avoiding every camera and onlooker in the gallery. Faced with an airtight chain of evidence, the encrypted security camera footage, digital IP logs from Aspen, forged mortgage applications, recorded phone calls, and pediatric medical records, both Chris and Victoria surrendered before trial. Their attorneys negotiated a plea agreement. Victoria accepted 2 years of probation, heavy restitution fines, and community service for felony forgery and fraud. Chris pled guilty to bank fraud and criminal child neglect, receiving a suspended prison sentence paired with 2 years of strict probation, court-ordered anger management, and mandatory parenting classes. The evidence presented leaves no room for ambiguity, Judge Robert Henderson declared, his deep voice resonating off the high ceiling. He adjusted his glasses, looking directly at Chris. A parent's duty is to protect, not to abandon or exploit. Your career or personal frustrations do not excuse child neglect. Judge Henderson brought down his wooden gavel with a sharp, decisive crack. The criminal proceedings cleared the path for the family court hearing that followed immediately after. Based on Child Protective Services evaluations, pediatric testimony from Dr. Carter, and witness statements from Mrs. Evelyn Jenkins, the judge granted Nora sole legal and physical custody of Chloe. Chris was granted only limited, supervised visitation at a county center, contingent on completing his court-ordered counseling programs. Furthermore, the court ordered the fraudulent mortgage refinance application completely voided. The house was placed solely in Nora's name, and Chris was ordered to forfeit his claims to the property equity to cover back child support, court costs, and legal fees. When the hearing concluded, Nora walked out of the courtroom into the quiet hallway. She pulled a folder from her briefcase containing a legal petition she had prepared weeks in advance with Audrey's help. It was a formal name change application. An hour later, Nora sat at a small oak desk inside the county clerk's office. She picked up a black ink pen. On the line marked petitioner, she signed her full maiden name, Nora Morgan. Beneath it, on the line marked minor child, she checked the box approving the legal name change for her 6-year-old daughter. Chloe Sterling was officially Chloe Morgan. Nora held the stamped, official certificate. The paper felt crisp and smooth between her fingers. The name Sterling, a symbol of 3 years of cold isolation, financial deceit, and quiet suffering, was erased from their lives forever. That evening, a soft golden sunset washed over the driveway of their home. Nora and Chloe stood together in the garage. The space no longer smelled of freezing dust and motor oil. Nora had spent the week sweeping the floor, scrubbing the oil stains with lemon detergent, and painting the concrete walls a warm, soft ivory. Bright overhead LED lights illuminated every corner. Chloe wore a bright yellow sweater and blue jeans. She walked over to the far corner beside the workbench, where Chris had once left his dusty tools. Lying on the floor was the old, stained, moving blanket she had huddled under 3 months ago. Chloe reached down. With her small hands, she picked up the heavy blanket. She walked over to a large black trash bin sitting near the open driveway. Without hesitation, she dropped the blanket inside and let the heavy plastic lid slam shut with a loud, hollow thud. Chloe turned to Nora. A small, bright smile lit up her face. "Mommy, Barnaby says this room isn't cold anymore." Nora knelt beside her daughter, pulling her into a warm embrace. She rested her cheek against Chloe's soft hair, which now smelled like sweet apple shampoo. "It's never going to be cold again, sweetie," Nora whispered softly. Chloe squeezed her mother's neck tightly. "Does this mean I get to stay with you forever?" "It means we're home," Nora said, pulling back to look into Chloe's clear, shining eyes. "And nobody can ever make us feel like we don't belong." Chloe giggled, grabbing Nora's hand and pulling her toward the kitchen door. "Can we make hot chocolate now? With extra marshmallows?" "As many as you want," Nora smiled. They walked inside together, shutting the door behind them. The deadbolts locked smoothly, with a clean click. Sunlight faded into a peaceful twilight over the quiet street, and for the first time in 6 years, the house was filled with warmth, light, and the gentle, unstoppable sound of healing. 1 year later, a warm April afternoon bathed the rolling hills outside Clarksville in rich golden sunlight. The air smelled of freshly cut grass, sweet honeysuckle, and warm spring earth. Soft breezes rustled the bright green leaves of the ancient maple trees surrounding the property. Nora stood on the wide wooden porch of a small, charming cottage situated on a quiet acre of land 15 minutes from her office. The house featured clean white siding, dark green shutters, and hanging baskets of pink geraniums swaying gently in the wind. Nora wore a simple white linen shirt, dark blue jeans, and comfortable leather flats. Her shoulder-length bob caught the warm sunlight, highlighting soft golden tones in her hair. Her face looked radiant, relaxed, and entirely unburdened. The tight lines of worry that had once etched her forehead were completely smoothed away. A major promotion at Community Bank had elevated her to Senior Data Compliance Officer, placing her in full charge of regional audit operations. She was no longer an invisible clerk shuffling spreadsheets in the dark corners of an office. She was a respected leader in her field, financially independent, and completely in control of her life and her home. In the front yard, 7-year-old Chloe ran across the lush grass, her loud, bell-like laughter echoing across the open field as she chased a golden retriever puppy. Chloe wore a bright floral sundress, her brown hair tied back in 2 bouncy pigtails. Mrs. Evelyn Jenkins sat on a wooden bench nearby, holding a glass of iced tea, her eyes shining as she watched Chloe play. A dusty blue sedan pulled up to the gravel driveway, its tires crunching softly against the stones before coming to a stop near the wooden mailbox. The driver's door opened slowly. Chris stepped out onto the gravel. He wore worn blue jeans and a faded polo shirt. His hair was unkempt, streaked with silver gray at the temples. His shoulders slouched, his posture defeated. His face looked hollow, lined with the stress of court-ordered probation, low-wage labor, and public disgrace. Having completed his mandatory anger management and parenting classes, he was allowed his first brief court-supervised visit with Chloe. Chris stopped at the edge of the lawn. He stared at the white cottage, the manicured lawn, and the vibrant flower garden. He looked at Nora standing tall on the porch, calm, poised, and dignified. For a long moment, Chris stared at her in utter silence. His mouth opened slightly, as if searching for words he had rehearsed 1,000 times during his lonely nights. He looked small, withered by the inevitable consequences of his own arrogance. "Nora," Chris said, his voice raspy and hesitant across the quiet yard. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for everything I did to you and Chloe." Nora stood at the top of the porch steps. She looked down at him. She felt no sudden rush of anger. No lingering bitterness tightened her chest. No desire to hurt or mock him stirred in her heart. The deep wounds he and Victoria had inflicted had healed into clean, quiet strength. "I know, Chris," Nora replied, her voice smooth, steady, and clear. "I forgive you, not for your sake, but for mine, so I don't have to carry your heavy mistakes anymore." Chris swallowed hard, his eyes dropping to the dark gravel beneath his worn boots. He nodded once, unable to meet her steady gaze. Nora turned her attention to Chloe, who was walking across the lawn with the puppy held gently in her arms. "Chloe, your dad is here to say hello," Nora said softly, keeping her tone neutral and encouraging. Chloe looked at Chris. She did not flinch. She did not hide behind her mother's skirt. She did not run away in fear. She simply gave him a small, polite wave before sitting on the grass beside Mrs. Evelyn to feed the puppy a treat. The dark fear that had once shadowed her young heart had vanished completely. 15 minutes later, Chris drove away down the quiet country road, his car disappearing beyond the tree line into the distance. Nora walked down the porch steps and stood in the center of the yard. The late afternoon sun reached its magnificent golden hour, casting a warm, amber glow across the green hills, the blossoming dogwood trees, and the peaceful cottage. The air felt fresh, cool, and sweet. Nora closed her eyes and took a long, deep breath, letting the warm spring wind brush gently against her face. She opened her eyes and smiled, a genuine, unforced smile that lit up her entire face. She was completely free. She belonged to herself, and her daughter belonged to a bright future built on truth, dignity, and unconditional love. Revenge had never been a victory. The true victory was standing in the sunlight, unbowed and unbothered, knowing that no one could ever take her peace away again. All shadows must fade before the truth, and every pain is simply the start of a beautiful rebirth. Always remember, the right to write a new chapter of your life is forever in your hands. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below so we know we're walking this journey together. Hope to see you on the next page.